Hello everyone, this is God of Politics. I'm going to go to a brand new video, but before we get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But in today's video, I will be doing another 2024 election prediction video, this time for a matchup between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the current president versus the former president, a rematch of 2020. Now, I consider this to be the most likely scenario. I don't think it's the only possible scenario. I think there are multiple possible scenarios. Ron DeSantis is the candidate. Kamala Harris is the candidate. Someone other than all four of these candidates. You can see here Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis running on a ticket. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris running on a ticket. There are a lot of different scenarios, some more likely than others, but I would consider this to be the most likely scenario out of all of them. But it could still, be changed as of now. But I think a lot of people accept that a Donald Trump-Joe Biden rematch is certainly a likely scenario. And so I am going to be predicting it here for what I think would happen in 2024, given a lot of the factors that we have now. Joe Biden's approval rating, things he's done with Congress, the likely result of the 2022 midterms, a lot of stuff going on with Trump. There's a lot of things to take into account when making these predictions, but overall, I'm going to make this prediction. I put Ron DeSantis as the vice president. I think he's the most likely contender if Trump is the nominee, and I've put Kamala Harris as the Democratic vice president. I don't think Joe Biden would replace her if he is the nominee again. But we can start off with the safe Republican states, which include Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, all of Nebraska except for the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, actually not Texas, this is not 2012, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, South Carolina. I'm also going to include Iowa and Ohio. I think they're both going to be safe. I am also going to include Maine's 2nd District as a safe Republican district, I should say, not a state. And so that adds up to 149 safe electoral votes for the Republican Party. And for the Democrats, I'm going to put California, Oregon, Washington, as well as Colorado, New Mexico. I won't put New Mexico as safe, but I will put Colorado as safe. Hawaii, I'm going to put as safe. Illinois, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, District of Columbia, D.C., and Maine's 1st Congressional District. This gives Biden 191 safe electoral votes, and it gives Trump 149 safe electoral votes here. And so we can get into some of these likely margin states here. I think first, Florida would be a likely margin state. Trump and DeSantis would have to sort something out in terms of them being from the same state, but I think that Trump would be able to fix it by saying his home state is New York, but they would both have a regional advantage when it comes to Florida. Trump did well here in 2020. Ron DeSantis is, of course, the current governor from here, and so I think they'd be able to have more trends amongst Hispanic voters, more than what we saw in 2020. As well as you would see a continued shift of those trends, I should say. And you could see just general trends through the Republican Party across the state of Florida due to that regional advantage. And I don't think the Democrats would try too hard there as well, especially compared to 2020 when many thought Democrats could win the state. And that actually might be the only state which I'm going to put as likely Republican here. And for the Democrats, I do have Virginia as likely Republican. Virginia is a state that could easily go by a safe margin, but I think that there are other things to be said about the state of Virginia. I think that the state party has gotten slightly better, and I think given that I think Trump will do slightly better overall, I think that could translate into doing slightly better, though less better than he would do overall in the state of Virginia. And I think that would push it down slightly to a likely margin because Biden won it by a safe margin, but by 0.1 percentage points here. So if it goes 0.1 percentage points more Republican, it's below a safe margin. But despite that, it's still going to be a very solid district for the Democratic Party. It's going to be a pretty solid state for them. New Mexico is another state that I am putting at likely Democratic. It's 5 electoral votes. You used to vote to the left of Colorado. Now, not so much. Now, I don't think it's trending Republican the way a lot of people say. I think it's, you could say stagnant in a lot of ways. Maybe it's trending Republican in some ways, but other ways it's trending Democrat. It has a lot of internal trends. There's a lot of things to consider here. But this isn't a state that's going to be competitive in 2024, but it is a state that I do think may get closer, and that is notable, and that is why I am putting it as likely Democratic. Now, that puts Joe Biden at 209 electoral votes, Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis at 179, but when you add Texas to the mix as well as North Carolina, that gets them all the way up to 235 electoral votes here. They get 56 from those two states alone, 40 from just Texas here. Now, Trump, I think, is going to do worse in Texas than he did do in 2020. I think if he is the candidate again, you're going to see a continuation of the trends that we saw in 2020. I think that the rural areas in a state like Texas are somewhat maxed out, and while there are still areas for Republicans to gain, especially along the Rio Grande Valley, other urban areas, I think that overall Texas is still a state that, especially with Trump on the ballot, is trending more towards the Democratic Party, and I think that you will see that in the 2024 election with this possible scenario here. And I think that while it's not going to be, a competitive state per se, I think it could be a closer state, probably going by around 4 percentage points. I think that would be a fair prediction. As for North Carolina is, again, I mentioned this before, one of those stubbornly Republican states, and I don't think it is going to shift to the Democratic Party in this election. It could get slightly closer. But as of now, I think Trump probably wins it by around 3 percentage points here. In the gubernatorial race probably also does flip at this point as well. I'm also going to put Wisconsin as a lean Republican state. I really don't think Democrats have a bright future in the state of Wisconsin. I think Trump probably wins this by just above 2 percentage points, therefore pushing it above a tilt margin, which I consider to be 0-2, and into the lean margin, which I consider to be 2-5. And then, of course, the likely margin being 5-10, 10 plus is safe. But in the state of Wisconsin, trends are pretty favorable here for Republicans. While I think Trump might do slightly worse in the WOW counties, there's a lot of other counties where they have room to gain, and I think that it is going to give them a pretty strong result. And I think in the state of Wisconsin, it will give them a lean margin of victory. Now, as for the Democrats, I think they win Minnesota by lean margin, Nebraska's 2nd district by lean margin, and New Hampshire by a lean margin here. Now, Minnesota went by about 7 points in 2020, 7.1 percentage points, as we can see here. I think Biden will do slightly better in the Minneapolis suburbs, but he is going to fall significantly in these rural areas. These rural areas are not maxed out yet, and Republicans do have room to gain. I think that they will in the state of Minnesota, and I think that they also have room to gain even some urban areas. If you look at those inner city areas, similar thing in Texas, I think you could see inner city areas, more urban areas, you could see shifts to the Republican Party. They're not going to be major. Democrats are still going to win those areas overwhelmingly, but small shifts do matter, especially in areas as large as that. New Hampshire is a state I'm putting at lean Democrat. Now, you could say New Hampshire doesn't like incumbents. You could, say all of these things, but I do think that Trump is uniquely a bad candidate for the state of New Hampshire and the Northeast in general. And I think if we're talking about a 2024 matchup, he's not going to win the state. I think a lot of people have accepted that at this point. But I think it could get closer, but overall, for right now, I'm going to put it as lean. Nebraska's 2nd district, I'm also putting as lean. Nebraska's 2nd district is, of course, I think it did get slightly redder in redistricting, but it is a suburban area. It is trending to the left overall, and I think Democrats do win that by a lean margin. And I also forgot to say Maine at large, I'm going to put as likely, and for some reason Maine's first wasn't safe, but Maine at large is going to be likely Democratic there. I think most people can accept that as well. And so we've got 5 states here that I am going to consider tilt margin states here. And I can start with the state of Nevada, which I do think narrowly goes to Biden. I think this may be one of the closest, if not the closest state in this hypothetical election. I think Nevada will shift a few points to the Republicans. I think Democrats, while they will get some favorable shifts in some of these more whiter college-educated suburban areas, I think that the more diverse areas with more Hispanic voters are going to shift in this election to the Republicans, and I think that that will make the overall margin smaller, though I think at the end of the day, Biden does slightly win it. However, I think Arizona does flip to the Republicans. Now, you do have similar shifts here. You have Hispanic shifts that I think are going to shift and continue to shift more to the Republicans, but you have these suburban shifts that I think will shift more to the Democrats. So counteracting that, plus a lot of other factors, I don't think incumbents are going to do as well as they used to, like 1980 versus 1984 when Ronald Reagan won it in a landslide. You can look at a lot of other examples, 1972, and of course there are exceptions to this. Of course, 1992 would be an exception to that, but there are more examples in history where incumbents do better. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case anymore, and I think if you're looking at a state like Arizona, which was very close, you don't need much to flip the state, and I think that Trump will be able to do it by a very narrow margin. That puts him up to 256. However, I do think Biden gets Michigan by a tilt margin. This is of the three, I guess you could say, main Rust Belt states or main Midwestern states that were talked about, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Michigan was the one that did go to Biden by the largest margin. He won it by nearly 3 percentage points, which is actually more than what he won Nevada. So that's a very interesting thing to note, and I think that while you do have some favorable trends to Republicans here, it's not as favorable as it is in the state of Wisconsin, and so I think when it's all said and done, Biden does win this by the skin of his teeth. However, I think that Trump, getting himself over the line, wins the state of Pennsylvania by a tilt margin here. Pennsylvania is one of those very close states. It's going to be close in 2022, was close in 2020, was close in 2016, and I think it's going to be close in this election as well. Biden barely won it, and I think he may continue to fall in some of these areas like Lucerne County, areas around here that did shift to him in this election, but I think will start to shift back against him if he goes up against Trump again, and I think that will give Trump a narrow victory, getting him over the mark, even with a Biden victory in Georgia, with that, which is mainly due to the trends we're seeing, these suburban trends that we're seeing. But I don't think that's going to be enough. I think Trump flips Arizona, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Some of the lowest margins in the 2020 election will be very low margins in 2024, relatively speaking. Wisconsin may go by a little bit more. You could argue, Michigan could go by a little bit more. Whatever you may argue, these are going to be close states either way. And I think while Trump does win narrowly overall, this is going to be a very hotly contested election. Biden is unpopular, but Trump is unpopular too. He's more unpopular than a lot of other figures, but he also doesn't, those figures don't have the same name recognition that Trump has. So Trump has some positives that other candidates don't have. He has some very big negatives that other candidates don't have. And so weighing that all up, I think as of now, I'm going to give him a slight victory, but this is going to be one of those toss-up races that really goes either way at the end of the day. So thank you all for watching this video. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But again, guys, thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you guys later.